The emperor stood in his palace, entirely naked except for a coating of gold dust, proclaiming himself the embodiment of the sun. Meanwhile, his guards busied themselves with the gruesome task of strangling dinner guests who dared to blink without permission. But here's the kicker, this wasn't even Caligula. Caligula often steals the spotlight as Rome's infamous madman, the horse-loving senator, the divine impersonator, and the guy rumored to have seduced half the Senate's wives out of sheer boredom. Yet history hides an even darker reality. In truth, Caligula was practically sane next to some of the other lunatics who reigned over the ancient world. We're talking about emperors who skinned people alive for headaches, kings who drowned entire harems based on a single rumor, and rulers who held dinner parties with ghosts or appointed rats to government positions. So, buckle up, because once you read this list, you'll see that Caligula was just the warm-up act for a true freak show. Here are 11 emperors more depraved than Caligula. By the end, your oddball coworker won't appear nearly so strange anymore. Let's start at number 11 and slide down the blood-slick staircase into madness. 11. Elagabalus, Rome's gender-bending rose assassin asterisk. If there were a reality show called Extreme Royals, Elagabalus would have been the star everyone secretly hoped would stay on the air simply for the chaos. Crowned emperor at 14, he treated the Roman Empire as his personal nightclub, his first decree. Everyone must worship his favorite deity, giant black meteorite from Syria he called Gabal. Yes, he replaced Jupiter with a space rock. But theology aside, Elagabalus truly excelled at bizarre performance art. He would host banquets where the ceilings showered guests with so many rose petals that some suffocated. Imagine dying in a fragrant floral avalanche just because your emperor thought it would be amusing. He didn't stop there. Elagabalus donned women's gowns, insisted on being called empress, and offered absurd sums of gold to any surgeon who could transform him into a woman. One day, he'd appear dressed as a goddess. The next, a high priest draped in purple silk, conducting animal sacrifices before his meteorite. He married 5 women and at least 2 men, including a chariot driver named Heracles, whom he proudly introduced as the Empress of Rome. Ultimately, the Roman populace had enough. Soldiers butchered him and tossed his naked body into the Tiber River, which in Roman politics equates to a pink slip, except he was the pink slip. Asterisk 10. Nero, the rock star who burned his own city asterisk. Nero might be the only person in history who responded to Rome is burning with "Fetch my lyre." Legend has it that he played music as flames engulfed the city. While this could be exaggerated, one thing is clear: the man was all about drama. He started with the murder of his teenage stepbrother, and then turned against his mother, Agrippina, who had been manipulating the empire from behind the scenes. First, he tried to kill her in a boating accident. When that failed, he sent assassins to stab her. Nero's love life reads like the script of a disturbing soap opera. He kicked his pregnant wife, Poppaea, to death in a fit of rage. Lost in grief or perhaps boredom, he found a teenage boy named Sporus, who resembled Poppaea, had him castrated, dressed him in women's clothes, and married him. As for the burning of Rome, historians suspect Nero may have started the fire to clear land for his new pleasure palace, which boasted a giant rotating dining room and walls adorned with jewels. Once the city lay in ruins, he blamed the Christians, executing them in horrific ways, such as turning them into human torches to illuminate his gardens at night. Eventually, the Senate declared him a public enemy. He fled, lamenting that an artist was dying inside him before stabbing himself in the neck. The empire sighed in collective relief. Asterisk 9. Commodus, the emperor who thought he was Hercules asterisk. Commodus was the Roman Empire's answer to a shirtless influencer who just discovered steroids. The son of the Stoic philosopher Emperor Marcus Aurelius, he declared himself the reincarnation of Hercules. He strutted through Rome in lion skins and brandished a giant club, posing for statues as if filming an ancient gym selfie reel. But the true madness unfolded in the arena. Commodus didn't just watch gladiators fight. He became one himself hundreds of times. His opponents were usually blindfolded, bound, or armed with wooden weapons. He would slay giraffes, ostriches, and elephants before cheering crowds while the Senate wept into their togas. He charged Rome exorbitant fees for his appearances, effectively bankrupting the empire so he could play hero. He even renamed Rome Colonia Commediana and demanded the months of the year be renamed after his many titles. Ultimately, his mistress poisoned him. When that didn't work quickly enough, a professional wrestler strangled him in the bath. Ancient Rome had little patience for subpar performance. *8. Domitian, Rome's paranoid tyrant *. Picture living under a ruler so paranoid that he lined the palace walls with mirrors to watch for assassins sneaking up behind him. That was Domitian. He began as a relatively competent ruler, but paranoia quickly consumed him. He executed senators for alleged conspiracies, often based on mere whispers or because they sneezed at the wrong moment. He demanded to be addressed as Lord and God in everyday conversation. You couldn't just say, "Good morning," but rather, "Good morning, Lord and God." Nothing screams job satisfaction like mandatory flattery, but Domitian had a darker side. He allegedly forced prominent Roman women into sexual servitude at his private palace parties, with those who refused mysteriously disappearing. Eventually, even his wife conspired against him. Domitian was stabbed to death in his bedroom, and Rome promptly attempted to erase him from history, smashing his statues and chiseling his name off monuments. That's how despised he was. *7. Caracalla. The brother-killing psycho Caracalla's life reads like a Shakespearean tragedy, with significantly more blood and far less poetry. At 23, he murdered his own brother Geta, while their mother looked on. Geta's blood splattered across her gown as soldiers hacked him to pieces. Caracalla then commanded that every coin, statue, and painting bearing Geta's image be destroyed, even executing 20 people simply for mourning his brother. Caracalla fancied himself the new Alexander the Great, embarking on grand military campaigns and slaughtering entire cities over minor slights. In Alexandria, he invited the city's leading citizens to a festival, then massacred them all once they were gathered. Ultimately, Caracalla met a fittingly undignified end, stabbed to death while urinating by the roadside, a conclusion befitting an emperor who ruled like a rabid pit bull. *6. Justinian II. The noseless nightmare * Justinian II's reign shows that sometimes losing your nose should be a hint to retire. He began his time as a ruler in the late 7th century decently, but then he turned tyrannical, raising taxes, torturing nobles, and executing anyone who dared dissent. The people finally revolted, slicing off Justinian's nose and exiling him to Crimea. But rather than fade away, he spent years plotting a comeback. He forged alliances and gathered an army, returning to Constantinople with a solid gold prosthetic nose. Picture a man shimmering into your throne room, demanding loyalty with a gleaming beak on his face. Once back in power, he embarked on a vengeance spree that made John Wick appear polite. He ordered mass executions of anyone who opposed him initially. Heads rolled, and he even began killing randomly to remind everyone who was in charge. Eventually, the empire had enough. His own generals betrayed him and beheaded him. It turns out, gold noses can't save you from karma. *5. Ibrahim the Mad. Ottoman excess unleashed. Ibrahim the Mad earned his moniker for good reason. He spent the first 22 years of his life locked in a gilded cage inside the Ottoman palace, designed to prevent potential heirs from plotting coups. After his brother's death, Ibrahim became sultan and promptly lost his mind. First, he developed an obsession with fur, not just wearing it, but covering everything in it: walls, ceilings, pillows, transforming the palace into a nightmarish giant teddy bear. Even in summer heat, he paraded around Istanbul in heavy sable cloaks. But that was just the beginning. Ibrahim had a preference for very large women, sending agents across the empire to find the fattest woman alive. They returned with a 330-pound Armenian woman nicknamed Sugar Cube, so taken was he, that he made her governor of Damascus, granting her a royal stipend. However, paranoia set in, convinced his 280 concubines were unfaithful. He had all of them tied in sacks and thrown into the Bosphorus. Only one managed to escape alive, and the tale spread through Europe as evidence of Ottoman madness. Eventually, the court decided Ibrahim was more trouble than he was worth. His mother ordered his execution, likely by strangulation with his own fur-lined ropes. *4. Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the Mercury Maniac. Qin Shi Huang unified China in 221 BCE, built the first Great Wall, and introduced the world to the Terracotta Army. Impressive achievements for sure. Unfortunately, he was also very much out of his mind. Terrified of death, he sought immortality, dispatching expeditions to find the mythical islands of eternal life. When those failed, his court alchemists fed him mercury pills, liquid metal, promising it was the elixir of life. Instead, it slowly poisoned him. Under the influence of mercury madness, Qin became one of history's most paranoid rulers, constructing an extensive network of tunnels linking over 270 palaces to travel incognito. He never spent 2 nights in the same bed, executing anyone who leaked his whereabouts along with their entire family. In a bid to erase history, he ordered book burnings, burying approximately 460 scholars alive who protested. When he finally died from mercury poisoning, officials hid his decaying corpse in a carriage surrounded by rotting fish to mask the smell until they could return to the capital. Thus, Qin was entombed in a vast underground palace, surrounded by rivers of liquid mercury, because nothing screams eternal life like marinating in poison forever. Asterisk 3. Emperor Valentinian II. The exploding brain emperor. Asterisk. Fast forward to the late Roman Empire for a dose of the bizarre. Valentinian II took the throne as a child, but his real claim to fame was his temper. Witnesses described his veins bulging from his forehead, ready to burst. One day, during a tirade against an envoy delivering bad news, Valentinian's eyes rolled back, his face turned purple, and he dropped dead. Modern doctors speculate he may have exploded a blood vessel in his brain during a fit of rage. It's not an assassination, but dying from your own rage-fueled aneurysm certainly earns him a spot on this list. This man literally blew up from anger. Talk about losing your head as emperor. 2. Adolf Fredrik of Sweden. The man who ate himself to death. Asterisk. Sometimes depravity stems from gluttony rather than cruelty. Adolf Fredrik, King of Sweden in the 18th century, was not particularly cruel. He didn't throw concubines into rivers or hold mass executions. However, he deserves a place here for dying in possibly the most foolish royal way imaginable. On Shrove Tuesday in 1771, Adolf Fredrik feasted on lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, smoked herring, and copious champagne. But that was merely the appetizer. For dessert, he inhaled 14 servings of Swedish pastry filled with almond paste and whipped cream. His stomach distended alarmingly to the point that his servants feared he would pop. Moments later, he collapsed, succumbing to digestive issues. Swedish historians politely dub him the king who ate himself to death. Imagine being remembered for centuries, not for diplomacy or wars, but for your inability to stop consuming pastries. Asterisk 1. Henry VIII. The walking biohazard. Asterisk. All roads lead to Henry VIII, as no list of depraved monarchs would be complete without England's notorious marital executioner. We know he had 6 wives and broke from the Catholic Church when the Pope wouldn't allow him to trade in wife number 1 for a newer model. However, textbooks often skip the grisly details. By the end of his life, Henry weighed around 400 pounds on a 6 feet 2 inches frame. His legs were ulcerated and oozing pus, with the stench of rotting flesh trailing him so intensely that courtiers could identify which room he occupied from 3 rooms away. His doctors drained pints of pus daily from an open wound in his thigh. He even designed custom furniture to support his bulk and required mechanical assistance to mount his horse. His eating habits were nothing short of insane, starting each day with half a roast chicken, half a pig, pies, and gallons of ale. But here's the truly horrific part. When Henry died in 1547, the gases of decomposition built up in his bloated corpse so dramatically that his lead-lined coffin burst open overnight, inundating the church floor with bodily fluids. In the morning, dogs were found licking the remains of the once mighty King of England, who had shattered the church, executed wives, and ruled with an iron fist, ultimately ending up as dog food. If that's not cosmic justice, I don't know what is. So there you have it, an illustrious rogues gallery of emperors so unhinged that they make Caligula seem like your slightly eccentric uncle who collects garden gnomes. We've encountered rulers who drowned harems, poisoned themselves in pursuit of immortality, and exploded in fits of rage. We've seen palaces converted into fur-lined funhouses, dinner parties with ghostly guests, and kings whose leg ulcers could clear a banquet hall. And if history teaches us anything, it's that truth is often stranger than fiction,